Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes. We still have people getting on, so we just want to wait a couple of minutes. You see the slide that's up gives some instruction on turning on captions and subtitles. So if you want to turn on captions, select the CC button in the video controls to turn on captions, and then you can change the caption language by selecting the settings button, which is the small gear icon, selecting caption subtitles, and then choosing the language you want. So we're just going to wait a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. For people just joining, we're just going to wait one more minute. You can see some instructions there if you want to turn on live captions or you need to change the language of captions. Just wait maybe another 30 seconds here and then we will get started. Thank you. All right, hello everyone. I think we are ready to get started here. I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping things here before we jump into the content. Again, there's the instructions there for turning on captions and subtitles. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to enter questions into the Q&A. Kate Hutton with OEM will be on the back end, and if your question can be addressed by her, she'll address it in the Q&A chat. If it's something that seems relevant to the whole group, then we'll hold it for the end so we can pose the question to our panel of presenters and make sure that you get the answer from the appropriate subject matter expert. So feel free to put in questions as they come up, but we may not answer them until the end. We will be recording the session and we'll post it to our YouTube channel by next week with the captioning. If you registered for the session and included your email, or you logged in with Teams and logged in with an email, then we should have captured your email and we will email out slides and a link to the recording once we have it. We'll mention this again, but please register for future webinars and you can find them on our calendar at the Office of Emergency Management website at seattle.gov/emergency. And just a heads up, we have, I think, 4 different people speaking. I'm going to do my best to switch the cameras so the person speaking you can see on camera. Sometimes there will just be a couple second delay when we do that, so just be prepared for that. And then just bear with us as we are switching, between 3 to 4 people in terms of who is controlling slides and whose camera's up there. So we may have slight delays, but we will do our best to keep things on track. So with that, I will turn it over.
Hi, my name is Jill Watson. Welcome to the City of Seattle Earthquake Response Webinar on Emergency Shelter and Feeding. This is being presented by the Seattle Human Services Department, Seattle Parks and Recreation, and the Office of Emergency Management. As Matt mentioned, we will have 4 presenters. It includes myself, Jill Watson, Emergency Management Strategic Advisor. I'm with the Seattle Human Services Department, and the other speakers will introduce themselves.
John, you want to turn your camera on?
Good evening, everybody. Happy Tuesday. My name is John Heinga. I'm the Emergency Management Manager for Seattle Parks and Recreation.
Right, go ahead, Deborah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Whitmer. I serve as the Vulnerable Populations Planning Coordinator on the Seattle Human Services Department's Emergency Management Team.
And hello again, everyone. My name is Matt Offlick, and I'm the Community Relations Manager with the Office of Emergency Management. So I will throw it back over to Jill to get us started.
So the objectives of this session are threefold: to understand key elements of the city's shelter and feeding earthquake response strategy, to understand the need for whole community response to the potential impacts of a catastrophic earthquake, and to understand how your personal preparedness fits in with the city response. So the picture on this slide shows an aerial view of some downtown buildings with much of the view obscured by low-level clouds. This is a good launching off point for this section on situation overview. The scenario we're talking about is a catastrophic earthquake, specifically a 9.0 Cascadia earthquake. As mentioned in the earthquake response overview given by Matt in May, the rough probabilities of an earthquake for the Seattle area are about 86% chance of a Nisqually-like event in the next 50 years, so a 6.8 magnitude or so, 33% chance of an 8.0 or greater, likely from the subduction zone, and a 12% chance of 9.0 or greater. So let's take a look at the potential impacts that could occur from a scenario such as this. The impact map on the right is showing the level of projected building damage for a Cascadia 9.0 scenario using an earthquake modeling software. The red areas are showing where the heaviest damage is expected, with the highest concentration of expected damage being in Soto, Pioneer Square, Harbor Island, Ballard, Interbay, and the University District. Most of these areas are in fill soil and in areas prone to liquefaction. So what we're looking at is thousands of buildings damaged, dozens to hundreds of deaths, hundreds to thousands of injuries, thousands in need of shelter, multiple fire ignitions with spread risk if not contained, heavy transportation and infrastructure damage, and damage in the tens of billions of dollars. Basically, each one of us would be impacted. So what's the reality of this? What we'll be experiencing are roads and bridges damaged, stores running out of supplies or closed, utilities such as power, water, and sewer may be damaged, gas stations and ATM machines may not work, hospitals will be overwhelmed, phones, cable TV, and internet may not work, and there will be significant damage to commercial and residential structures. In other words, it will be a very difficult time for all of us. What we're also looking at is isolation, both within the city and the region. So the isolation map on the right was produced as part of the Regional Resiliency Assessment Program, a 2019 collaboration between the Department of Homeland Security, Washington State Emergency Management Division, and the Washington Department of Transportation. It shows estimated bridge reopening times after a 9.0 Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. A high percentage of bridges are represented by orange or red dots, signifying that the projected reopening times are very long, ranging from 3 months to over 2 years. With the infrastructure damaged, a catastrophic earthquake could leave the city isolated due to a combination of geographic and infrastructure vulnerabilities. Many planned earthquake responses rely on outside resources, which might be delayed or diverted if it is a regional event. The following planning assumptions are a few that I've taken from the city's Earthquake Incident Annex, which is available on the city's website. The assumptions on this slide and the next one will all have an impact on shelter, food availability, and other resources needed by the community. So let's start with staffing challenges. This is applicable to City of Seattle staff, as well as any other business, organization, or other entity in the city. Many employees will experience significant delays getting to and from home and work, if they can, due to damaged transportation infrastructure. For City of Seattle employees, less than 40% live in Seattle. This can be both an advantage and disadvantage depending upon what is needed. So for instance, they may experience less impact where they live, while the city experiences more impact, or vice versa. Regardless, getting to and from work will be a challenge for all of us. Staffing shortages will not be limited to city staff. All organizations in the city will have staff directly impacted by the disaster and or unable to get to work. So these staffing shortages will lead to a disruption of services and resources. We saw this to some degree during the COVID response as well. So another category we can look at is resource shortages. Again, we have experienced resource shortages with COVID. With an earthquake, the impact will be immediate and throughout the community. So some of the assumptions are there are not enough public safety resources in the city to immediately address all or even a majority of the life safety needs expected after a severe earthquake. Many organizations, public and private, routinely use just-in-time ordering and do not generally stockpile significant amounts of supplies. After an earthquake, shortages of critical items such as medical supplies are likely. And the city does not stockpile food or water for the general public. Additionally, the level of personal preparedness by the public is insufficient to significantly decrease the need for public services. Additional planning assumptions are that service disruption will occur, some of which are providing key life-sustaining support. So, for instance, in-home care meal delivery will be disrupted by major earthquake, further exacerbating existing vulnerabilities. Access and functional needs, this includes but is not limited to Disability and American with Disabilities Act requirements. There is a large population of individuals in Seattle with access and functional needs that must be addressed during disaster response and recovery. More details on access and functional needs will be addressed later in the presentation by Deborah. Shelter needs. Initial shelters may be spontaneous, non-traditional, and rudimentary. The city will work to improve shelter conditions in conjunction with other relief activities as soon as possible. Another assumption is that the number of individuals seeking shelter will exceed the city's emergency shelter capacity. Additionally, the generally cold, wet climate may add urgency to the sheltering operation. Additional considerations include that needs could include assisting people from other areas. That includes visitors, many people who work in the city, people here for medical treatment, students, and evacuees from other regions. So for instance, if there is a tsunami on the coast, we may find people moving through or to Seattle. We can also assume that some families and loved ones will be separated. Some entities will have their own plans already. So schools plan for earthquake situation. Some job sites also have specific plans, and other organizations as well. The limited resources will need to be prioritized. We will all want things immediately, but we cannot all get them. There will not be the capacity nor the resources, so prioritization will need to occur. There will be reduced capacity to manage and distribute resources, as well as a reduced ability to move supplies and people. Another challenge is that the reality is a changing reality. The situation will be dynamic. Our information will be incomplete and partially correct. Needs will change over time. Priorities will shift. So what we are working on now may not be as relevant another week or two in the future, and vice versa. Delays will occur. This can also be a challenge when we are trying to support services and provide resources, and delays may occur to the extent where what we have done is no longer relevant as well. There will be challenges that may not have a solution. This occurs in the best of times and during a disaster even more so. So let's take a look at our overall shelter and feeding strategy. The picture here shows someone packaging up food into paper bags for distribution. A key starting point is race, social justice, and equitability. Fundamentally, disasters amplify inequities. Historically, we have seen in disasters, inequities can result in people dying, injured, devastated, and irreparably harmed disproportionately. It can also interfere with the ability of a person to recover from the disaster. If equity does not exist prior to a disaster, why would it exist during or after a disaster when conditions are so much more difficult? Response and recovery operations will take the path of least resistance. It relies on systems that may already foster inequity. We need to be aware of and address these issues, preferably prior to a disaster. During the COVID response, programs to support access to food included equity as a key component. Emergency Support Function 6 is also known as Mass Care, Housing, and Human Services. This annex or plan is on the seattle.gov website, and you will be seeing references to ESF 6 for short. This is an eclectic collection of services to support people during a disaster. It does not include the medical side, but it does include a range of other areas that we'll review shortly. So in our plans on the Seattle website, we have the ESF 6 Mass Care, Housing, and Human Services Annex. Appendix 1, the sheltering appendix, which John will go through further later, the food appendix, and support agencies' capabilities. Additionally, on this website, another relevant plan is the Earthquake Incident Operations Plan. That's where I got the planning assumptions from. We also have some additional support plans that address pet sheltering and a more detailed sheltering response guide. So some of the support agencies for ESF6, Mass Care, Housing and Human Services include City of Seattle departments and offices, such as Human Services, my department, Parks and Recreation, John's department, Seattle Center, Animal Shelter, Neighborhoods, the Office of Sustainability and Environment, Housing, Seattle Public Library, Education and Early Learning, Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, Economic Development, and these are just from within the city. So there's many other governmental, non-governmental agencies that also support this area, and a few of them are under the Health and Medical, the Public Health, Seattle and King County. They are a real key partner with us. Northwest Healthcare Response Network. Moving over to the county, King County Department of Health and Social Services. There's also Seattle Public Schools, Seattle Housing Authority, American Red Cross, Crisis Connections, or you may know them also as 211. On a state level, it can also include the Department of Social and Health Services. On a federal level, it can include the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, which is the federal ESF6 lead, and the Administration for Children and Families, basically all the friends we can get. So the goals of ESF6 really center around life supporting, and safety. We want to reduce the impact to people. We want to enable people to make the best decisions for themselves on what they need during a disaster. And then we want to move people quickly to recovery. The responsibilities of ESF6 include helping identify populations most at risk, mass care, which we are focusing on in this presentation. So this can include shelter and warming and cooling centers, such as we opened during the recent heat wave, feeding, hydration, bulk distribution of items. And we are also looking at ADA requirements. So any services and resources that we provide need to meet ADA requirements and be accessible. Addressing access and functional needs, interpretation and translation can be some of those. Also, we want to help provide information and share information. Reunification of people also falls under this. And then we're also looking at consideration of race, social justice, and equitability, as mentioned before. And many, many other areas is determined by the event and what is needed by the community. So some of the challenges that we face is that there are potentially conflicting or no solutions. We also need to coordinate a vast range of partners, governmental and non-governmental partners, as well as the community, and there's a lack of resources. We need to be able to align supporting partners to the same goal and priorities, and this includes within the Emergency Operations Center. We also need to be timely. It is very difficult to move quickly in a coordinated fashion with not enough resources in a timely manner. So the response may be too late to be relevant. And then another area we already talked about was equity. One of the strategies for coordinating ESF6 responses includes the use of task forces. particularly around sheltering, feeding, and you may also see it for children, animals, or any other area of focus. Benefits of using task forces for organizing include it focuses on an objective. It makes efficient use of people. It coordinates efforts. We're able to integrate different organizations internally and externally. It can coordinate. It can help us incorporate spontaneous efforts. It identifies who is managing this objective and area. It does not need to be tied to the Emergency Operations Center. And a task force can continue through to recovery. At this point, I'd like to introduce John Hayenga talking about sheltering. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Jill. Sheltering. My first slide shows a graphic on the right side. It's a house that is outlined in blue, and in the middle of the house is a heart that's outlined in red right above the entryway, and our logo of our Seattle Parks and Recreation right below it. A little facts on our department before I start. Seattle Parks and Recreation provides a welcoming and safe opportunity to play, learn, contemplate, and build community and promote responsible stewardship to the land. Seattle Parks and Recreation promotes healthy people, a healthy environment, and a strong community. A couple fun facts on Seattle Parks and Recreation. We manage over 6,400 acres of park system and over 489 parks and natural spaces. We provide athletic fields, tennis courts, play areas, specialty gardens, 25 plus miles of boulevard, and over 120 miles of trails. Our park system includes about 12% of the city's land area. And Seattle Parks and Recreation manages many facilities, including 27 community centers, 8 indoor swimming pools, 2 outdoor seasonal swimming pools, 4 environmental education centers, 2 small craft centers, 4 golf courses, and an outdoor stadium. During a citywide emergency response, Seattle Parks and Recreation typically responds and supports the Emergency Support Function number 6, the Mass Care and Sheltering Task. SPR works closely with the Human Services Department in response to the city's mass care and sheltering needs. Jill, I cannot advance the slides. There we go. The next slide shows 4 pictures of 4 of our community centers. They're showing the entrance to Garfield Community Center, Rainier Beach Community Center, Bitter Lake Community Center, and Meadowbrook Community Center. These are some of our priority 1 community centers that we use for sheltering if we are responding to an emergency shelter need to help support the Human Services Department. Next slide, please. So we have 10 community centers that have generators. 4 of our centers with generators can power 100% of the facility. 6 of them have generators that can provide a limited power, kind of like electrical outlets and some security lights only, just based on the size of the generator. And we have a graphic shown in the bottom right hand side of this slide of a very bright and lit light bulb. Next slide, please. Our community center priorities that have generators, our Priority 1 community centers, we have 6 of them. We have Meadowbrook Community Center in the northeast section of the city, Bitter Lake Community Center in the northwest section. We have Queen Anne Community Center kind of in the central west. We have Garfield Community Center that's located in the southeast section of the city. Rainier Beach Community Center that's also located in the southeast section of the city, and Southwest Community Center that's in the West Seattle Southwest area. These centers have a C in parentheses after them. That means that they have the capacity to create a campus type setting if needed for a large event. We have Priority 2 shelters with generators like Rainier Community Center in the southeast section, Magnuson Community Center in the northeast, Jefferson Community Center in the southeast, and Delridge Community Center in the southwest. The campus concept. We can leverage nearby facilities such as schools and sports fields to expand the shelter capacity and space for other supports. Here's a good example. Middlebrook Community Center can turn into a campus concept for a larger shelter capacity. The graphic in the middle of the slide shows an aerial map with Meadowbrook Community Center in the middle. That's kind of outlined in kind of like a greenhouse. The playfield is just adjacent to the west side of the community center. And then to the north is Nathan Hale High School with the ball fields. And then also across the street, we have Jane Addams Middle School with a few other ball fields and the school with some other facility support. And then to the east, about a block away, we could even leverage the elementary school if needed on a larger event. So here's a sample of the breakdown of how we would create a campus type shelter site. So we have 7 circles. We have 1 circle in the middle, and we have 6 circles surrounding the middle circle. So the middle circle is the Meadowbrook Community Center, and we can host about 138 beds, and we also have a kitchen and an area for intaking folks that would be coming into the shelter. So the very top circle, kind of like in a clock formation at the 12 o'clock position, is James Adam Middle School that has 2 gymnasiums, some shower facilities, and we estimate we can host about 150 beds if needed. Now going clockwise in kind of like the 2 o'clock position, we've got John Rogers Elementary School that has 1 gymnasium and can host 75 beds. Down at the 4 o'clock position, we have a site that can host a mobile pet shelter. The 6 o'clock position are ball fields that we can set up some soft-sided sheltering, kind of like tents. The Meadowbrook field can host about 1,000 beds, and then the Jane Addams ball field can host about another 1,000. At the 8 o'clock position is the Meadowbrook Teen Center that has a gymnasium, could host about 50 beds, and a possible pet shelter. And then at the 10 o'clock position, we have Nathan Hale High School that has 4 gymnasiums. It has a cafeteria, a kitchen, lockers, some showers, and can hold up to about 500 beds. So we have our shelter options. So this slide is a table with 2 columns and about 5 rows in it. The first shelter option is the American Red Cross in a non-city facility. The next column shows the role of the city. So the city wouldn't be involved in that because the Red Cross would basically be running it in a non-city facility. The second row shelter option is a American Red Cross in a city facility, kind of like a community center or the Seattle Center or other city facility. Parks Department could determine the facility availability, set up access, assign after-hour staff, reschedule conflicting activities or program, and can provide janitorial service. The next option could be a park-operated shelter in a city facility. The American Red Cross could provide the shelter supplies and food. The city would provide the shelter, staff, supplies, about 100 trained staff in the American Red Cross standards and procedures, have about 3,500 cots and other supplies, but not including any food. The next option could be a mega shelter operation run either local or the National Red Cross. Facilities could be like a stadium or a large event center, a port, county, state. FEMA could be involved at this point. The city's role potentially would be for assisting with like security, traffic control, garbage pickup, and other logistics. And then our last option could be a shelter with trained park staff that could help staff the American Red Cross shelter sites. And then the city would provide a staffing assistant, and that would include like overtime or reassigning staff from other departments to help out. So all of our shelter sites, regardless of what they are, we have to comply with the Americans with Disability Act. All the sites have to be accessible for services and the facilities. There's an ADA checklist for emergency shelters, and the slide here shows a link where you can get some more information. And we also have to allow service animals. And then there's 2 graphics on this slide. And the top graphic on the right is the new international accessibility signage with a person in a wheelchair showing the movement because they're mobile and can be accessible. And it also has some Braille for sign language. And then the graphic below that basically indicates that service animals are always welcome at our shelter sites. Support services may include feeding, healthcare, hygienes like shower, hand washing, toilets, security, laundry services, child care, emotional and spiritual care, and transportation. This slide has a circular graphic on the right side in multicolors divided into 4, kind of outlining the feeding, the health care, hygiene, and support that people may need when they come to our shelters. So now looking into the SoftSided shelter site consideration. The sites have to be appropriate for the soft shelter, like tents. So the sites have to be well drained or have some good drainage, hazard free, has to be accessible. There has to be water supply, sanitations like restrooms, and power. accommodation for both publicly provided and privately owned tents. That will probably be more realistic of how this will turn out, because we won't have enough tents provided by the city. So hopefully we're relying on private or other people to bring their own tents to some of these soft-sided shelter sites. And there's got to be space for support for the services at the campus. So this is an example that we came up with that could support a soft-sided shelter site, which is Lower Woodland Park. So this graphic shows two pictures. The picture on the bottom left shows a person in a two-man tent or two-person tent. And then the graphic on the left side literally shows an aerial view of Lower Woodland Park. So Lower Woodland Park is about 80 acres in North Seattle, just south of Green Lake. It's accessible to the major road and transportation system. It has picnic shelters so that people can do some light cooking. It has on-site restrooms. There are 7 turf sports fields and 7 fenced tennis courts. There is a fenced dog off-leash area. There's a parking lot that can hold up to 540 cars. And there's no main building and no facility structure on that site. But it's pretty open, and it could serve quite a few of our tents on this site if we had to open up a soft-sided shelter site to help out. So you guys are probably wondering, where did the supplies come from at these shelter sites, and how do we get them so quickly? Well, the city has 4 cache sites located around the city. So this first slide here shows Holler Lake Cache. So this is like a storage shed that we've already preloaded many of our shelter supplies if we had to activate one of our shelters. So again, we have 4 shelter cache sites located at Holler Lake, Magnolia, Sunny Gym, which is just off Airport Way, and Westbridge, that's located on West Marginal Way in West Seattle. Each cache holds about 3,500 cots plus bariatric cots, about 7,000 blankets, 523 medium kennels, 20 large kennels for animals, and a variety of kits and other supplemental supplies. Additional partners that could help us with the supplies could be the American Red Cross and King County that could bring in some universal and medical cots as well. So the shelter appendix has a lot of good information. So the City of Seattle Emergency Management Plan link is here below. It's also on the Office of Emergency Management webpage. The Emergency Support Function 6, ESF 6, Mass Care and Housing and Human Services, and Sheltering Appendix. So we've got a lot of information in the resource page that's below towards the end of the presentation that if you'd like, you guys can all access. So some spontaneous sheltering. There's some pros and cons about this. Some of the pros are rapid initial response. People just want to do something. If they don't feel safe in their home, they're going to initiate some kind of response on their own. Another pro is it keeps people within their community. It can provide familiar environment, culture, and language to folks and residents. It meets the immediate need because it's going to take some time for staff to literally get back into the city and activate one of our shelters. But there are some challenges with this. It may not, we may not know all the shelter standards, may not create or may create an unsafe environment, and it may not be accessible, and it may not be sustainable for a long period of time. So those are some pros and some challenges there on just the spontaneous sheltering, but we do recognize that this will probably happen, especially if there's a large earthquake. So connecting with the spontaneous shelters, we need to identify those shelter sites. We need to establish communication, and we also need to determine whether support is needed or even wanted at some of these spontaneous sites. I mean, people may just say, we're fine, we've got enough supplies, we're good, and we just need to know that. All right, thank you. Jill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, John. That was really helpful. So let's look at some other areas involving the mass care. Pets are really key. They may be the only family members people have left after a disaster. The picture shows two small dogs on a chair. Pets are a source of love, comfort, and companionship, which is much needed in a traumatic situation. Over 65% of households in Seattle have pets. In a catastrophic earthquake, pets are also part of the population that would be affected. If you have pets, please include pets in your emergency planning and have a bag with key pet supplies. The Seattle Animal Shelter is the lead for the city's disaster pet sheltering planning. Ideally, people can stay with pets, but that is not always the case. Some of the strategies the city has for pet sheltering and support include identifying how Priority 1 community center shelter sites can co-locate pet sheltering, identifying larger potential shelter sites at Magnuson and the Seattle Center, obtaining a grant to purchase a mobile pet emergency trailer, also known as PETS, ability to expand capacity at the Seattle Animal Shelter facility, and we're ready to request other assistance such as from King County or through national memorandums of understanding with other animal organizations. This is a picture of the Pet Emergency Trailer Seattle, as I mentioned, also known as PETS. So Seattle has some emergency pet sheltering supplies. It includes this mobile trailer with supplies for setting up a pet shelter, and there are additional pet sheltering supplies kept in the city's 4 shelter caches, as John mentioned earlier. Let's take a look at support for people sheltering in place. So rather than going to a separate shelter, another strategy for sheltering is to help people stay in their homes if it's safe. Generally, people prefer to stay in their homes if possible. The picture with this slide shows 2 adults and 2 children in the kitchen of a home. Support for people sheltering in place can take different forms. You may have experienced some of what is needed to continue living at home when your services were interrupted during winter storms, power outages, or even COVID. So some of the benefits of sheltering at home include it keeps families and pets together. It enables the use of homes already set up for unique needs and preferences. It maintains access to resources in the home for cooking, hygiene, clothing, beds, etc. It retains community and support systems. It preserves familiarity with local resources and transportation. It supports individual and community recovery. And additionally, fewer resources are needed to create new shelter space and additional support. People may have already experienced support that they needed to stay at home. As mentioned during other incidences, there can also be any number of strategies to help people, some of which the city may help provide. So some examples are opening community points of distribution, or CPODs. These are sites for community mass distribution of basic supplies such as water and meals ready to eat, or MREs. Providing home delivery of food, water, and medication or other supplies or assistance for people who cannot go out and procure them. Creating recharging stations. These are sites where devices can be recharged. Opening warming shelters. These can also be sites such as libraries and community centers. And expediting temporary repairs and providing tarps. So moving on to feeding, this picture shows 3 people making meals in a commercial kitchen. Access to food is likely to be a challenge with all the damage to infrastructure and impacted people that we've already outlined. So challenges to food access is likely to occur almost immediately. You'll have closed stores, restaurants, and services. The food supply chain will be broken. There will be damaged transportation routes and likely prioritization of goods and services that can move through those routes, since the capacity will be greatly reduced. There'll be potential loss of food, both within commercial establishments and in our own homes due to power outages and damage to buildings. There'll be reduced ability to prepare food and increased food insecurity. So this, what can cause this would be things like loss of jobs, loss of access to be able to use benefits. Some of the strategies to increase food access include increasing supplies through bulk purchases of food for food banks and meal programs. Restoring the food chain supply. That's going to be number one. That's so key, is keeping the systems that were designed to handle food to keep handling food. Food also has an added complexity in that unsafe handling can lead to severe health effects, including death. So we really want that food chain supply restored as quickly as possible. Another strategy is to provide food distribution to the community. So as already mentioned, community points of distribution, or CPODs, can help provide mass distribution. Also, as I mentioned, increased supply of food to food banks and restoring programs that are closed. Also, opening or supporting meal sites available to the public and increasing access to food assistance. So this can include additional cash and food benefits. Basically, what we're doing is using strategies that include everything, literally including the kitchen sink. It's a public-private partnership. During COVID, we used some strategies to increase access to food. which did include those bulk purchases of food for food banks and meal programs. We requested assistance from the National Guard for these programs. We also launched an emergency grocery voucher program, and we developed a Seattle area emergency food resources map so that people could look up and see where food resources may be available. So given the situation, we'll want to adapt and figure out what strategies might be most effective, with always our goal being restoring that food chain supply. So coordination of food response is really key. There'll be a lot of pieces in motion. So what you're looking at in the private sector, the obvious one is obviously that food supply chain. This includes manufacturers, grocery retailers, and restaurants. But another key part is what's going on with transportation. Without the transportation component working, food just doesn't move. So that's another key area that we'll be looking at. We are also coordinating food response through government agencies. So that includes city, county, state, and federal. We also have many non-governmental organizations that support food access day to day, but there's also some organizations that come into play specifically during disasters. So for instance, the American Red Cross can help provide and distribute food. The community also has ways of assisting and will also create local responses. Given that there's so many moving pieces in this, developing an emergency feeding task force becomes really key to organizing some of these efforts, to leverage each other's capabilities, to coordinate resources, and to help us target areas that most need the assistance so that we're not duplicating efforts. We did during COVID form an emergency feeding task force, and there were private, non-governmental, and governmental agencies all participating on the task force. These task forces are also echoed on up at the state and federal level, so they're also coordinating at all levels. Water is a separate, obviously critical area. So Matt already talked about in the May overview webinar that wet water, not necessarily potable water, will be targeted for critical customers such as shelters and healthcare. Then wet water will be available to maximum population benefit. So what we may be looking at is we're under a boil water advisory. Then potable water. So there'll be more details on the water response plan in the August 4th webinar on restoring utilities. There are many other support needs that people in the community may have, and this can also change over time. The picture shows 9 people standing in a circle with their hands together in the center, reflecting that coordination and helping each other is key, and addressing these needs is a community-wide effort. The city may or may not be involved in these efforts depending on needs, resources, and other factors. Sometimes the government is also not the best source to meet the need, but may be able to address an underlying factor such as restoring power. Examples of some of the additional needs that the city may be involved in helping to address are access to cash and EBT, debit and credit cards. The city will be working to restore power, which is critical for being able to use these resources. Communication devices such as cell phones, It is not uncommon for cell phones to be lost or damaged in disasters, which can mean also losing critical contact numbers. So that's something on a personal end to be aware of and plan for. The city may work with partners to offer communication options, from access to library computers to identifying donors for phones to specific populations. Access to the internet can be an additional need. Is it available citywide? If not, what strategies can be used to enable internet access? This can range from working with internet providers to offering internet access at libraries or other sites. Another need is ability to charge devices. So the ability to charge devices enables people to communicate, access information, maintain life supporting devices, and so much more. One that many people may not think about is mail. Is mail being delivered? Did you remain in the same location to receive your mail if it is being delivered? Or if you use a post office, is the post office available? Schools and childcare, as we saw with COVID, are really key. Are they open? If not, what can be done to reopen them? And this becomes also a challenge in sheltering. Are we sheltering, providing shelter services in schools? And if so, how do we get schools reopened if they're still being used for shelter sites? So the ability to apply for assistance is also a need that people may have. Do you have access to what is needed to apply for the assistance? This could include a computer, internet access, that contact information, which is so important. What address? Do you even know what address you will be at? And in order to apply for some assistance, you need documents, and documents become really critical in a number of ways. So loss of documents can create huge hurdles for people after a disaster, and some documents are even irreplaceable. Government and non-governmental entities try to coordinate to facilitate some document replacement. So this is a sampling of some of the needs the city may be trying to help address, and there can be many more areas. Deborah Whitmer will now be talking about making these services and resources accessible. Go ahead, Deborah.
Looking to get control. Doesn't want to move. Don't we love technology? There we are. Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Whitmer, and I'm a mature, white-presenting woman with glasses, and I'm wearing a purple shirt tonight. We're ignoring the gray in my short brown hair, though. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as this slide title says, accessibility of services. The graphic underneath the title text is of a woman's hand reading a page of Braille. And accessibility, it is about disability, but it also addresses a whole range of access and functional needs. So if I can get this to move. There we go. So what are access and functional needs? You will often see this abbreviated as AFN. And first, it's important to remember that most people will have access and functional needs before a disaster, not necessarily because of a disaster. And as Jill spoke about earlier, inequities that exist already are usually made worse in a disaster. So some examples of access needs might be access to personal and/or public transportation. Think about how this access need plays out in an evacuation situation or when supplies are being distributed from a central location. Do you have the ability to go there and get them? Or is that an access need? It also can be access to adequate amounts of fresh, healthy food. We experienced excellent examples of this access need during COVID, when traditional food and feeding programs were suddenly disrupted. And Jill talked a little bit about some of the feeding systems that were set up in order to meet some of those needs. We also can need access to the internet. We can't get away from the internet these days. And again, during COVID, we saw another tremendous push from in-person to online activities in almost every sector of life. So think about the disparities for children forced into online home-based learning, but who had no internet access at home. A small example of the huge equity access or equity issue inherent in internet access. And as Jill has mentioned, we're likely to lose some internet access as part of the initial stages of the disaster. And similarly, access to information. Because losing access to information can be a consequence of not having internet access, but there are also many other ways for information access to be disrupted. If digital information, for example, is not formatted for accessibility for people using screen readers, or if captioning is not provided for video, when live press conferences don't include an on-screen ASL interpreter, or information is only provided digitally and not in auditory or printed formats, for example. All of these can create access needs. And especially when information is only presented in English, that makes communication really difficult. In emergencies, it's critical that everyone receive and have access to the same information at the same time. I went too far. Then we come to functional needs. Now, this is an area where, whoops, yes, I did. All right, sorry. This is an area where it's most related to people with disabilities, although we need to remember that functional needs can also be a consequence of disaster. So think about breaking your leg or temporarily losing your hearing, for example. Those would be functional needs that would be a result of a disaster. So some examples of functional needs could include accessible physical spaces. So doors with openings wide enough for a wheelchair to pass through and not too heavy for someone with loss of a hand or arm strength or dexterity to still be able to open and close. Having ramps in addition to or instead of stairs. Everybody can use a ramp. And having restrooms with accessible stalls and hand washing facilities. It also includes accessible transportation and paths of travel. And that includes vehicles that accommodate wheelchairs and other mobility devices, and sidewalks and pathways that are well lit with compact surfaces and free of obstructions. Accessible communications, we touched on this above and refers largely to digital communications that are formatted for screen readers. That's the technology that reads printed material for someone who's not able to see it themselves. The use of ASL interpreters and video captioning are also part of accessible communications. It can also refer to large print materials in a native language, auditory recordings as other examples. And lastly, access to personal care services to assist with tasks of daily living, such as bathing, feeding, dressing, etc. These services are critical to supporting independence for people with disabilities, both at home and in an emergency shelter environment. See if I can get this to change. Oh, come on. I am having one of those days. There we go. So here are some examples of how the city supports access and functional needs in our emergency response, because this is something that we take very seriously. So all of our communications are done in accessible manners, and this means messaging done in multiple languages, including American Sign Language, which is considered a language, digital communications that are accessible for screen readers, captioning included with videos, press conferences have including on-screen ASL interpreters. And more importantly, the city uses concurrent multimodal delivery strategies. What does that mean? So we use multiple ways of delivering information all at the same time. And that means using a variety of print, video, digital, auditory delivery strategies all together to reach as many people as possible as quickly as possible. This is just going to plague me all night. So other ways that the city is supporting, let's see, 2 more ways. Examples are our public facilities. So they are going to always be accessible, and that means meeting the Americans for Disabilities Act standards for that specific building type and use. And that includes temporary ones. So that means if we stand up an emergency shelter, it will be accessible for people with functional needs. And our transportation services are accessible. You know, actually, the city itself does not generally provide public transportation services directly. We contract with King County Metro and Sound Transit to provide services in the city, and those contracts include provisions for equitable services and meeting access and functional needs. In addition, the city also actively participates in the Regional Alliance for Resilient and Equitable Transportation. I love this acronym, RARET. This regional group works collectively to improve transportation access for vulnerable populations in a disaster. We saw some of this work during COVID as we were able to put together some transportation options to help people get to testing and vaccination services. Let's see if we can do this again. This just isn't going to be my night. So some additional examples include ADA building assessment kits, and that has the proper equipment and ADA emergency shelter standards checklists, and those are available for building assessments prior to public use. And what that really means is if we're going to stand up a shelter, like one of the community centers, we have kits with all the equipment we need to go out and do an assessment to make sure that it is accessible. And if there are problems, to be able to make temporary or even permanent solutions that will fix that accessibility and do workarounds to make the facility accessible. And this supports the city's goals of offering accessible emergency shelters and other service locations like distribution centers for commodities or places where you might go to sign up for services. That would also include, this also includes welcoming support for all service animals in shelter and service locations. It just isn't going to be my night. There we go. The last 3 examples that I want to share around this tonight is that we do have equipment for communication support as well. And now this will include video relay for American Sign Language and languages, loop systems to allow for better vocal communications in a noisy environment. We have contracts with we will have contracts with personal care services organizations. They can provide caregiver support in our emergency shelters for people who require help with tasks of daily living. And we can call upon a regional resource, a FAST, F-A-S-T, which stands for Functional Assessment Services Team. So this is a team of multidisciplinary professionals, behavioral health specialists, case managers, other professionals who can work in shelters to assess functional needs and source needed resources. While they don't provide direct personal care services, they are able to help identify and address individual needs, working in conjunction with shelter staff. This is a regional resource that we can call upon, and because we share this with other counties in the region. Hopefully tonight you've started to understand some of the major challenges that the city will face in responding to a big earthquake and how and why public preparedness is such an important factor in response. There is no area, perhaps anywhere, where we need your help more than in your own neighborhoods. One of the things I get to do in my role with the city is work with neighbors and neighborhood groups to help them be ready to help each other, including being aware of and able to support various access and functional needs. And I need to go back one. Some good questions for you to think about are getting to know your neighbors. Who might you be able to assist if you can? Who might be able to assist you if you need it? And who might be more isolated and could use a check-in? These are kind of the basic questions you can start to ask as you and your neighbors get together. and start to figure out how you're going to help each other and be all in it together when some major disaster strikes. Oh, well, that didn't work. And I have no idea how to get out of that. Let's see. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, while I work to try to figure out.
I'll go ahead and restore it, Deborah.
Thank you. So
Yeah, no
some of you, when we talk about community support, some of you are already involved with one or more of the groups that we have in the city. And we're going to, there we go. We'll show them here in a minute. If you're interested in joining with others to become more prepared, we have a number of diverse community groups that are working together to build resilience. Just a few of them are on this slide. We have the emergency communication hubs. These are based in neighborhoods throughout the city. They train and practice together regularly, and their mission is to support communications and information exchange when communications are disrupted after a disaster. We also have auxiliary communication services, or ACS. These are our volunteer ham radio operators. They do amazing work to support citywide emergency communications and emergency center operations. We also have available community emergency response teams, or CERT. This is a statewide program, and they provide training and exercise opportunities in disaster skills, such as search and rescue and first aid. And lastly, but certainly not least, I like to recognize some of our volunteer food resources, such as Pea Patch Gardens and the Beacon Hill Food Forest. You know, in a major disaster, these kinds of neighborhood resources could become critical support for people with access and functional needs. The City of Seattle takes its responsibility to the people here very seriously. We are acutely aware of the disproportionate impact of disasters on people with access and functional needs, and we're working to identify and address those needs to the best of our ability and resources. But in reality, it's going to take all of us to respond and recover from a major earthquake. And supporting those with access and functional needs is something everyone can do. So now I'll send this back over to Matt. Thank you.
All right, let's give me a second here. So I just wanted to close by just talking about some key preparedness points. Jill did a good job about talking about the importance of being able to shelter at home and the benefits of being able to shelter at home if you have that option and you can have the things you need there. But we also want to highlight the importance of communication and reunification. Maybe I can move this. Jill, could you advance? Oh, there we go. So just a few points on communication and reunification. And on this slide, there's an image on the right that has kind of a cartoon illustration of Seattle. It says be prepared at the top and have some space to write in emergency contact information. That is an image of an emergency planning template that we have available on our website. We did have a list of resources to share with links, but we had some trouble getting that up on our website. So when we do follow up via email with the slides, we'll share those links as well. But things to think about: have emergency phone numbers stored in multiple places, not only your phone. So you can use a template like this to write those down. You know, we could be in a situation where you have access to a phone and it's just not your phone. Maybe your phone isn't charged, maybe there's no electricity and you can't charge it. So only having numbers in your phone could be problematic. So having numbers stored other places, written down, understanding that text messages are more likely to go through than phone calls. Especially after a major earthquake, it's very possible that our system is just overwhelmed. And there's so many people trying to use phones that calls won't go through. If you could try to use a text message instead, then that message can keep trying to go through and it uses less data than an actual phone call. So texting if possible. And consider defining a meeting place in case you can't get to your home. So if your family is spread out across the city during the day with children at school, people at multiple different workplaces away from home. Think about alternate locations that you could meet if for some reason you couldn't get to your home, and have some agreement on that. So if you're not able to communicate, everyone knows what the plan is. Some other things to think about from a communications and reunification standpoint: signing up for Alert Seattle. So if you're signed up for Alert Seattle, this is one of the ways that the city will push out information during an emergency. If you know that your friends and family are also signed up for Alert Seattle, then you can be sure that you're all getting the same information about what guidance is being given and what services are available. Know where your nearest community emergency hub is located. So, this has been mentioned a couple times in the past webinar and today, but hubs are locations where people can go to start sharing information and sharing resources in their neighborhood. So in the event that communication is down, that's a place you can go. So know where that location is, make sure friends and family know where that location is. And then also use social media platforms to communicate your status to friends and family. So phone service may be disrupted, but it is possible that you have data service of some kind from a phone, from a computer. And social media is a good way to let a lot of people know about your status, as opposed to making a lot of separate phone calls or sending a lot of separate text messages. And then a really big thing is just being familiar with reunification plans at children's schools and daycares, as well as your workplace. So something we know that we'll face is if we had an earthquake in the middle of the day and children are in school, children are in daycares, parents are going to want to get to them, and sometimes that will be difficult. And those places should and are required to have plans in place for how they go about making sure that children get back with parents during a disruptive event like that. So ask about those plans, become familiar with those plans. So that is all we have for tonight. Just a quick reminder of the future webinars. August 4th is our Seattle Public Utilities and Seattle City Light on restoring utilities. Jill mentioned that. There'll be a lot more detail there about restoring water service and how we might distribute water during emergencies. And then September 14th is our Department of Transportation on restoring transportation. So if you registered for the September one, know that we did have a date change, and you should have gotten an email last week showing that that date was changed, but just keep that in mind. It's the 14th now. It was previously September 1st. So I'm going to, if I can, so here's contact information for everyone that spoke today: Jill, John, Deborah, and myself. And I'll just leave this up here as we go to the Q&A. So I'll pass it over to Kate, who I think has some questions that came up in the Q&A chat that made sense to kind of bring to this larger group and ask to some of the presenters.
Sure. The first one is for you, Matt. How is OEM supporting neighborhoods to get together to make plans?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple ways. We have our Seattle Neighborhoods Actively Prepare program. So that program is really focused on encouraging neighbors to get together and plan at the block level or in their apartment building, condo building. And really, how can neighbors plan now so that they can respond together when an emergency happens? And we have a kind of toolkit for that, a book that goes along with that. You can request presentations from us. We're still strictly doing virtual things now, but we're going to go to some form of back to in-person in the future. So we have an online request form if you want a SNAP presentation. And we also have a well built out SNAP website that has a lot of those materials, so you can do a self-guided program. And then community emergency hub. So, the hubs are really an independent group of community members, but we work closely with them, and we are always out there encouraging people to join a hub in their area, form a hub, know where their hub is. And we're always supporting efforts to provide funding for new hubs through Department of Neighborhood grants and other efforts.
So the next question is related to that. And the questioner asks, how do we contact our network in the intermediate time while cell phones and internet are down? What methods or locations do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's where I would say, forming a SNAP group, or whatever you want to call it. The state also has a program, Map Your Neighborhood, and they'll send you materials to kind of have the same type of facilitated discussion with neighbors. So if you get with people on your block, get with people in your building and make some of those plans of how you'd respond together, where you could meet. I think that's the very micro level. And then understanding where hubs are, because SNAP is very much focused on immediate response. So, do you need to do some basic search and rescue or basic first aid or put out fires or turn off utilities on your block? And does everyone know how to do that? And then once you do that, it's kind of, is there a hub nearby that maybe serves a little larger area, so you can start sharing information, seeing what needs people in the community have and how you could help, and letting people know about what needs you have to see if other people can help.
Thanks, Matt. The next question is for John at Parks and Rec. How quickly will shelters be set up across the city?
Thanks, Kate. That's a really good question. So our shelter sites probably will not get set up probably for the first 72 to 96 hours. There's a couple things that has to happen. We have to make sure that the facility has been inspected by one of our either city inspectors, one of our park engineers that's certified to inspect facilities, or one of our contracting engineers that we have on a list that will be able to inspect our city facilities, make sure that they're safe to actually open and host a shelter. Once that happens and we get the green light, then I have to get some city staff involved. We have to make sure that the closest cache site is available so that we can start loading and bringing the shelter supplies to the center. We've got to get our staffing plan together so that we'd be able to have folks in there. We have to get our shelter operator in place, and that takes some time. So that's why it'll take, it sounds like a long time, but reality, basically, it will take us probably about a good 72 hours to inspect and to set up the shelter site before we open it for the general public.
Thanks, John. The next question is going to be for Deborah. Given that people may not be able to get medical supplies and prescriptions that they rely on for life support or just their general health, how many weeks or months of supply should people save up? And, if people are expecting maybe to have medications that are going to be difficult to come by, are there any considerations for that in the shelters, or should folks prepare for that?
That's an excellent question, and really good idea to start thinking about that now.
I think we lost Deborah. So is there another question we could move on to, and then we could go back if she gets back on?
Sure. This one I think is for Jill. How likely would it be for a person with a pet parrot or another kind of, non-dog or cat type of pet to be able to get to a shelter?
How likely would it be for them to be able to get to a shelter?
Like access,
to access a shelter.
A lot of people who have, could they go to a people shelter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're able to get information about a specific shelter prior to going to it, that may provide specific information about what the shelter is able to accommodate as far as pets, or redirect to another site. Otherwise, if you do show up at a shelter with pets, that a city-run shelter, that is, they will work at that site to see what they can do to accommodate you. So just keeping in mind that there are also limitations on pet behavior. So if an animal is being dangerous, they're not going to necessarily be able to stay at the shelter. So making sure you know your animal and what you need is really key as well.
Thank you. And I think it sounds like Deborah's back. Is that right?
Yes, I have no idea what happened there. All of a sudden, I was no longer in the meeting.
Yeah, we've only first couple words of your answer. So if you could just give that prescription answer, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So the short answer is the best thing that you can do, especially for over-the-counter medications, is stockpile 30 days worth. Now, we recognize that's not going to be easy with prescription medications. We'd like to shoot for at least 2 weeks for prescription medications, but to be honest, insurance companies, most of them do not make that easy. The best advice we can give you is 2 different things. Number 1, make sure you have a written list of your medications, the prescribing doctor and their phone number. That list will then help you to reestablish getting those medications once we get pharmacy services back up and running. And that's really important to have that information. The second is to plan with your healthcare provider now. Talk to them about getting assistance in helping to advocate for getting additional medications to be able to stockpile, and also assistance in dealing with the situation if you're on prescription medications and run out of them, how you might be able to slowly come off those medications. If you're looking, you're looking ahead and you're seeing you only have a couple days worth, work with your provider now to see how you can titrate down or slowly, gradually reduce that medication safely if that were to be necessitated in an emergency. Now, the good news is that we do have groups working to improve access to extra medications. Public health is working on that issue, and so is the disability community. There are a group of advocates that are working with insurance companies. There are also plans in place through public health to provide emergency medications over and above what your insurance may allow. Almost all, and I believe actually now all insurance companies have an emergency clause that would give you a week or 2 worth of medication, even if you have already gotten your allowance for that month, according to your plan. So we do have some of those things worked out, and public health is continuing to work on those access issues.
Great. And then the next question is also for you, Deborah. How will personal assistants get to the shelters?
That's a good question too. If your personal assistance is with you when the event occurs, or when you go to a shelter, you should take the personal assistant with you. That person should accompany you to the shelter. And again, this is something you should make a plan with them ahead of time as to exactly how that's going to work. And this kind of a thing can also be worked out with the company that provides those services for you. So have that conversation with them as well, perhaps also with your case manager. They can also, you can arrange for them to come and meet you at the shelter if they're available and able to do that. And then again, as a last resort, the shelter staff can help you find an alternative or use our contracted agencies to provide services while you're in the shelter. And then they'll do planning for you as you transition out of the shelter and back in either to a home environment or to where your next living situation will be. And they'll work with you to help to transfer those personal services into your next living environment.
Great, thank you so much. So our next question is, I'm going to give this over to John or Jill. Will the shelters provide pet care?
Jill, I can jump in. So we work very closely with the Seattle Animal Shelter in opening up our shelters as part of our service, and they have a lot of great resources. They will give us some starter kits with like kennels and blankets and some pet food to help us establish a small area with people that have pets or service animals. And if we cannot accommodate someone with a pet, we will reach out to the Seattle Animal Shelter staff, and they have been very helpful in the past in helping us find sheltering or assistance for folks. A good example is when I went down and helped out the Pierce County Office of Emergency Management during the wildfire evacuation. We had to set up a makeshift animal shelter for 4 horses, 1 cow, 1 goat, and 1 llama. So this Humane Society and the animal shelters in this area are very resourceful and are very helpful.
Great, thank you so much. I have a second question for you, John, and this one will be the last for you. Some of the community centers are in or very close to liquefaction areas, and earthquake hazards can impact the community centers. So how do we plan for that?
So the kind of like I said before we even open up a shelter, we would have that facility inspected by one of our park engineers or one of our city inspectors or one of our contract engineers to make sure that that building is safe. If it's not safe for public use, we will not open that. And our park engineers are always closely monitoring the stability of each one of our sites. So we would give plenty of notice to folks and our friends at Office of Emergency Management on what sites are accessible and to open up a shelter.
Thank you so much. And then our last question, I'll give to Matt. What percentage of the city has seen the SNAP, so that's the Seattle Neighborhoods Actively Prepare presentation? Is that enough?
I don't think I could say a percentage. You know, we do map some of things where we've done programming, but we've also been doing that program for over 10 years, I believe. So I will say it's never enough. You know, we do run the challenge of there are some people that are interested in preparing with neighbors, interested preparing as individuals, but there is a large percentage of the population that see these things as kind of far off events and don't necessarily want to take the time to plan for them. And there's people who honestly just don't have the time or resources to do that. And they're, you know, struggling to meet day-to-day needs. And so their ability to plan for a future event and put time and resources into preparing is very limited. But we're always trying to spread the word, increase the number of SNAP presentations we're doing out there, and then also reach people in other ways and attend community events and places where we're going to at least get some information to a person, even if they're not going to come to a kind of standalone hour or 2 hour program related to preparedness, but hopefully get them to take some action that will help.
Great, and that's it for the questions.
All right, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you again to all our presenters. And like we said at the beginning, once we have this recording all wrapped up and we get our resource sheet with some of these links that we talked about on it, we will send out an email to everyone whose email address we have, sharing the slides, sharing the recording, sharing that resource sheet. And if you didn't share your email and you're not on that list, you can also just go to our Seattle OEM YouTube channel. We have the last 2 webinars up there, and this one will be up there in the next few days. And just a reminder to also look at the calendar and sign up for those future webinars. Like I said, that upcoming utility one should be very good. And then we have transportation in September. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good night.